Let's talk about why you need a repairable Linux laptop. One of the things to think about with the world we're in now is that we've been really trained to like inferior products in 2024. And one of the inferior products that we currently have is a laptop that is not upgradable and also a laptop that's not repairable. The reason that companies are doing this is they're locking us into an ecosystem where we have to pay several $1,000s to actually make an upgrade. Now, fortunately, there is actually an alternative, and I'm going to briefly talk about one potential alternative, which is the framework laptop. Some people recently have enlightened me about this particular company. And what I think is really cool about it is it reminds me of some of the days of when I was in junior high and I was into RC cars. When I was into RC cars, I was able to swap out the tires, the battery, the motor, and kind of really learn about the different things that I was doing with that RC car. I could get a different radio controller, and it really got me excited and got me knowledgeable about what's happening. And what's cool about this framework company is that you can see as well, they're giving you something that you can build every single component yourself. And if you really think about it, why are we not allowed to repair our laptops? Why are we not allowed to upgrade our laptop? One, it's a terrible waste, and two, it's a lot more expensive. Now, if we scroll down here, you can see that you can actually add in portable graphics modules. So you don't even have to necessarily start with a graphics module, right? You could say, hey, you know what? I don't know yet if I need like a fancy graphics module. So I'm going to wait, see what happens. And if I need it, I know I can always add it in the end. Versus if you're forced to buy a $3,000 laptop, you're forced to potentially always buy the most expensive option because you think, well, I can't upgrade it, so what do I do? So it's really a trap. Anytime you're buying a piece of hardware that's locked together, they're tricking you. And I think the Mac ecosystem is a pretty good example of this. Now, if we look through and we look at what you can do as well, you can actually rearrange and customize things, which again, if is kind of more to the spirit of how a lot of stuff used to work in the 1980s, 1990s, is that you could actually customize and configure things. And you also can choose what ports you want as well, which is a really cool concept. Like I want some USB-C, USB-A, et cetera, et cetera. You also can get different chips, like you can do AMD, you could do Intel. And then this is the other thing that's really cool about upgradable laptops is that you're able to, maybe ship it initially with a little bit of RAM or, maybe less CPU cores than you want, but you can just swap it out in the future. And this is what's really cool. And you can sell that part back. So if we look through here as well, there's a whole marketplace that you can choose to like swap things out and change things with other people. So I think what's really interesting about all this stuff is that it really shows that things are cyclical, and we can easily get sucked into an ecosystem where again we have to buy a $2,000 Mac every year or $2,000 iPhone, and it's all locked and we can't repair it. But as consumers, if we're able to be a little bit more picky, we can actually choose things that are really more in our best interest. And I think this particular company framework looks really good. They're pretty new. Hopefully other companies start to get into the same space instead of, again, locking you into an ecosystem where they're really tricking you or using a dark pattern to force you to buy something that's all enclosed. Now, I'll also say the other component that I'm seeing as well is Linux versus either OS 10 or Windows. Now, in the case of both of those, let me just briefly talk about what are some of the problems. So with Windows, one of the problems that we're finding is that it is, first of all, there's a cost to it. You have to pay for Windows. Also, there's the controversial recall feature where every single thing you ever do on the computer, screenshots, etc., are captured and potentially sent somewhere. And as someone who has experienced removing viruses in the past, that all the time hackers are looking for new things to attack. So imagine if anything you've ever done on a computer is basically collected and then a hacker can get into it and then leak it. It could be devastating. So it's a great example of a feature that almost nobody wants, but has actually been put into there for you. Likewise with OS 10, there's lots of features that are being put into it. For example, maybe you don't want a partnership with OpenAI, but that's been forced and it's going to be shoved into your next operating system. And you really don't have a choice about that happening. Now with Linux, you do have more of this idea of modular architecture. So it does come at a cost, right? Anytime you have the ability to change things around, there's going to be a cost associated with it. Now, when I first started using Linux in the 90s, I mean, things were very bleeding edge, and it took like weeks to get things working properly, and it was very, very challenging. But we've actually made a lot of progress in the meantime, and the dominant server is actually Linux. So everybody uses Linux servers, Amazon Linux, Ubuntu server, etc. And what we're now starting to see as well is that even people who are not as technical, professors, artists, regular business people, they're starting to really think through like, hey, are we at the peak of commercial operating systems where the stuff that they're giving us, it really makes the CEO of Apple happy, or it makes the CEO of Microsoft happy because they think they can boost the stock price, but it doesn't make me happy. And I think this is one of the reasons why it is actually worth thinking really carefully through this idea of, is it time for a repairable and upgradable Linux laptop? And I think the answer is yes. And so this would probably be the first place I would start. I have no particular interest in this company. It's just based on what I've looked at. They look like they're a pretty good start. And then if you can find a community that can help you out. And so, one of the things I guess as a takeaway is it's important to think about the concept of Kaizen. This is something I try to practice in my personal life is, how do I continuously improve? How do I look at what I have, never settle for what I already have been doing, and see if there's ways to improve? And I think getting away from commercial operating systems, I think they had their day. Like, I think there were some interesting things that they did, and potentially even all companies have an arc, right? Where they are very creative. There's lots of cool things, and then they start to atrophy and decay. And I think we're starting to see a lot of what used to be innovative is basically just, a lock-in strategy to extract as much profit as possible. So the CEO makes more and more money and the shareholders make more and more money. But as a consumer, you don't actually have to opt into that. And so I think this is another thing to think about in terms of like, how do I become more productive? How do we become, more efficient? How do I save money? How do I get more knowledgeable? I would say this is a good place to start, is look at your laptop, find one that's upgradable. There's a community around it. Look at the most popular choices, whether it's, Kubuntu, Ubuntu, maybe it's, Mint Linux or one of these Linux versions. And it is a cost, right? You're going to have to pay some time to, get up to speed, etc. But I think we're at the point now where we're really, in my opinion, there's no choice but to really heavily look at the Linux laptop, dive into it, and become an expert. If you have any questions about it, I'm happy to help. I've personally bought 2 Linux laptops that are upgradable just in the last several days. I'm happy to answer some questions. All right, talk to you later.